All right, hey people. Today is May 6th, 2023. It's about almost 5 p.m. here in Indiana. My name is Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View Live. Real quick, next week I'll probably be doing a show with Sola Scriptura 21 on YouTube, so I probably won't be doing a show. And it's actually really hard for me to do shows lately. I'm working a lot more. I do got two small children. I'm trying to make sure I spend time with them, and I get people, making some rude comments to me sometimes in the chat, and um, because they're always like, Chris, you focus on Daniel 8 and Seventh Day Adventist so much, and I just want people to know the only reason why I'm focusing so much on Daniel 8 and Seventh Day Adventist for right now is just because it's fresh in my mind. I'm also learning how to properly interpret the Bible. And I never really meant to go in this direction. I just kind of thought, I'd make, one little video pointing out something. And what happens is you get like feedback and comments and people arguing. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look right to me either. And here's why. And then next thing you know, I'm learning uh, the entire book of Daniel, which I never thought I could understand. And I'm also learning things like Hebrew calendar, which I never had any interest in understanding. It's like, and all this other stuff, and so I feel like it's kind of good for me to go ahead and talk about it while it's still fresh in my mind. But I am planning on working with a couple of people on something new, and I don't want to talk about it right now. I just kind of maybe want to surprise people. But it will probably, since the election's coming up and all that, I will probably be focusing on some of the political stuff going on because I do feel like that's important. It's like I had a family that came all the way from Europe to America in the 1600s, and I just hate the direction I'm seeing America go. And it's kind of like all this stuff is kind of tying in together for me. Um, but anyway, I don't want to get too far off base. But so I wrote this thing today, and and as I was writing it, I was thinking about how it helps you understand false teachers. Just if you understand the book of, if you understand Daniel 8 and how to properly interpret it, because again, this is another thing that I guess that prompted this was someone said, Chris, you never talk about the gospel. And it kind of, I gotta say, it kind of made me mad because, first of all, I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of videos. So, yeah, I can't talk about everything I want to talk about. And when I do make videos, it's just whatever happens to be on my mind, that's real recent that I can just quickly make, you know. And to be honest, when I'm talking about Daniel 8, at least the way I'm going to talk about today, it's definitely ties into the gospel because the same person that will criticize me and say, you don't talk about the gospel, I go, well, can you explain Daniel 8 to me? And they go, oh, it's future. I'm like, future? I'm like, okay, you don't understand the gospel. And I know people are going to be like, well, what do you mean? If you say Daniel 8's a future prophecy, that means you don't understand the gospel. Yes, because down here around verse, and I'll just read verses 8 through 13. It says, therefore a goat waxed exceedingly great, and when he was at his strongest, his great horn was broken, and for it came up four that appeared towards the four winds of heaven. So four horns come up after this great horn's broken. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed very great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and the stars to the ground and trode upon them. And these stars would be God's people. And it extolled himself against the prince of the host, from whom the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, this is where I'm starting to get into it right here. This daily sacrifice, does this still go on today? Because if this prophecy is future, like some people were trying to tell me, like, oh, it's got a future application. Okay, now you got to think about this clearly. Did Jesus, did his sacrifice on the cross, did that do away with animal sacrifices? Or do we still need to do them because it just wasn't good enough? See, that's the gospel right there. You're telling me this is future, as if the sacrifice Jesus did on the cross didn't do away with animal sacrifices. So, and that just, and so when someone said I don't know the gospel, how do you throw this into the future? And you're telling me you know the gospel. Obviously, I know the gospel more because I'm saying this prophecy, it had to happen before the crucifixion of Jesus, because if it didn't happen before the crucifixion of Jesus, then it's never going to get fulfilled, because this daily sacrifice was done away with at the crucifixion. And it's pretty simple as that. So now, if we know that this prophecy had to be done before the crucifixion of Jesus, we can then look to a period before 34 AD. At the latest, he could have possibly been crucified, right? So we look at a time period before 34 AD, and we start looking backwards, and we see if there's any kind of event that could have um, fit this prophecy, or else Daniel's a false prophet. It's either two things: either Jesus is not that sacrifice that does away with all the other sacrifices, or Daniel's a false prophet. There's no other way about it. So that means we got to tear out the book of Daniel. If this prophecy did not happen before Jesus, let's just tear the book of Daniel out and say Daniel's a false prophet. It didn't come true, right? But we don't have to do that, because this prophecy did come true with Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. And anyway, I'm going to go ahead and keep reading. And it says, and a time shall be given over the daily, a time shall be given him, talking about the little horn, which is Antiochus Epiphanes, over the daily sacrifice for the iniquity, and it shall cast down the truth to the ground, and shall and thus shall it do and prosper. Then I heard one of the saints speaking, and one of the saints spake to a certain one, saying, how long shall endure the vision of the daily sacrifice and the iniquity of the desolation, to tread both the sanctuary and the army underfoot? And he answered unto me and said, evening, morning, 2,300, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So this is talking about evening, morning sacrifices, because that's what the daily was. And I'll show you in Numbers right here. We have it. I got Numbers up on the screen. It said, command the sons of Israel that thou hast said unto them, my offering, my bread for my fire offerings, my sweet fragrance, ye take heed to bring near to me in its appointed season. And thou hast said to them, this is the fire offering which ye bring near to Jehovah, 2 lambs, sons of a year, perfect ones, daily a continual burnt offering. The one lamb thou shalt prepare in the morning, the boker, and the second lamb thou shalt prepare in the evenings, the erev. So we see that there's a morning and an evening sacrifice. So now when we read Dan, so that's where I get this evening, morning. This is evening, morning sacrifices, because the daily had 2 sacrifices done. One in the morning, one in the evening. So it's telling you that for 2,300 evening mornings, this is gonna they're gonna be interrupted, and then the sanctuary is gonna be cleansed. And see, the problem is, with 70 AD, you had the temple get completely destroyed. So if it didn't happen with Antiochus, now we have the temple being completely destroyed in 70 AD, and it went for more than 2,300. Daniel's a false prophet one more time, I guess, right? It's like so you got to look for some event that happened, because if I don't know how this can have a future application. I'm missing it. And the reason why I say that this helps you identify false teachers is I see all these prophecy teachers out there, having their little YouTube shows every day and all this other stuff, talking about how this has got some future application. And I really think these people have no business teaching the Bible until they can understand just the basic concept of Hebrews 10. Let me just read that real quick. And it's not going to take very long. And it says, "For since the law has but a shadow of good things to come instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, they would have not, excuse me, otherwise they would have not ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sins. But in these sacrifices, there's a remainder of sins every year, or there is a reminder of sins every year. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, 'Sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me, and burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure.' Then I said, 'Behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written of me in the scroll of the book.' And when he said the above, you have neither desired nor taken pleasure in sacrifices and offerings and burnt offerings and sin offerings. These are to be offered according to the law. Then he added, 'Behold, I have come to do your will.' He does away with the first in order to establish the second, and by that we will have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. So I don't see so far. I see no need for a continual daily anymore. Anyway, and every priest stands daily at his service, offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time until his enemies should be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." So he already made this single offering for all time to perfect those who are being sanctified. So that means you do not need a daily sacrifice no more, according to Hebrews 10. Any future trying to throw Daniel 8 into the future contradicts what Hebrews 10 is teaching. Now, me growing up, I grew up in a lot of Sunday churches. Right now, I'm currently a Sabbath keeping Christian, Seventh Day Sabbath keeping Christian, and I'm 100% against the Seventh Day Adventist Church. I believe they're a false church, and one of the reasons why is they do the same thing in a lot of the Sunday churches I teach. I mean, I went to growing up, and I would hear them preach, "Oh, this is future." Well, it's not. By even saying that, Daniel 8's a future prophecy, you're denying Hebrews 10. And then I see these same people bashing Seventh Day Adventists, but you're actually doing the same thing when you yourselves are throwing this prophecy into the future. You got to you just gotta let the scripture be and say this already happened. It was fulfilled in Antiochus Epiphanes. Judas Maccabees, ended his reign, and that's it. This prophecy has already happened. It happened in the past. It's done. We don't need a third temple. We don't need another daily sacrifice starting up. Just accept that Jesus paid for it all on the cross. One sacrifice, one perfect sacrifice that's perpetual. Don't need nothing else. So there. Now, if you ever hear a teacher and you go to a church and you're hearing them and they don't even know that Daniel 8's been fulfilled, just to walk right out of that church, because there's something wrong with a preacher that's been teaching in a church for 10 years and he can't tell you this. anyone, man. It's like, it's one thing about someone giving you like a simple gospel message, that's fine. But when you're going to sit there and tell me you're like a teacher and you're going to teach me something and you're wasting my time lying to me, and you're actually wasting my time telling me a message that's obviously an anti-gospel message. Like, if you know the gospel so well, like you claim, how come you can't even get Daniel 8 right? Like this stuff doesn't make sense. So I guess it's like with me, there was like a little irritation going on because I had a few people try and make this accusation against me, and they're the same people that can't even figure out Daniel 8. And it's like, I mean, to me, I don't know what have I ever taught that wasn't the gospel. What I'm trying to do is help. The main thing is I'm just trying to point people out to a few things that confused me and frustrated me as a Christian. How was it that I went to church ever since I was 8 years old and didn't even understand Daniel 8 until 3 years ago? Right? I mean, it's like that's ridiculous. It's like, was I rebellious or something? No. I mean, I went to church, and it's like I was going to church to learn. It's not like I went to church thinking I know it all. Because I mean, I sat there and I was like, I don't know. Can you tell me what's going on? And they would be like, oh, this is the future Antichrist, and he's going to do all this. And I'm like reading it, and I'm like, I don't like, where is this in this? I'm like confused, and and it's just like, when I started to argue with the Seventh-day Adventists, I was, well, actually, it was when I found out the Geneva Bible, because that's what I'm reading for now. And the Geneva Bible, written in 1599, it's got all these footnotes at the bottom. And right now, I'm on Bible Gateway. Anyone can go to BibleGateway.com, and you can look up the Geneva Bible version, 1599 Geneva Bible. It's got all these notes. All these notes were created back in 1599. So this is like what most of your Protestants believed. So this isn't like, oh, Chris is making up his own theology and everything, his own eschatology, and it's wild, it's crazy. It's like, no, this is kind of like, all the smartest people who cared about the Bible were sort of forced into Geneva because of all the persecution. And I'm not saying that they gave you a perfect Bible or perfect study notes, but I think like it gives you a really sound foundation to start from. And yeah, I do disagree with a few things in this Geneva Bible. Like, even the footnotes right here, they say that this 2,300, like in Daniel 8:14, they got this footnote. They said that is until so many natural days pass, which makes 6 years, 3 months and a half. Well, I don't believe this was that 2,300 evenings and mornings was 6 years and 3 months. I believe it was actually 2,300 evening morning sacrifices done, is halted or interrupted over the course of 1,150 days. So it happened in half the time. But, I mean, they had a misunderstanding, when they read it. But it's like these people were under severe persecution. It's not like everyone was super educated. You had only a handful of people that could read, write, let alone speak 8 different languages. And it's not like they had complete perfect understanding. So it's like, little things are excusable. It's okay if they got something wrong, but for the most part, you look at every other detail in these notes, it's pretty sound. I mean, and it's like they all attribute it to Alexander the Great being the large horn. Um, and even when you look in this, when you look in Daniel 8, I mean, if you just go down to the bottom, around verse 21, around verse 20, it starts to tell you what all those images are. You don't even have to guess at them. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of the Medes and Persians, and the goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. And so we know that's Alexander the Great. And it's like, that is broken, and 4 stood up are 4 kingdoms. So it tells you those 4 horns that stand up are 4 kingdoms which stand up of that nation, and not in his strength. Well, not what's not in his strength. That means it's not Alexander's children. And who wound up being it? Oh, he had 4 generals that his kingdom got divided into. So, I mean, so it's real easy to find. You go verify it with history. You can go look this up in history and see, oh, did Alexander have okay, he was a king of Greece. Oh, when he died, what happened? Oh, it got split up into 4 kingdoms. And then what happened? Oh, did Antiochus come from one of those 4 kingdoms? Yeah. Did Antiochus persecute the Jews? Yeah. We can read in the book of Maccabees and the works of Flavius Josephus that there was a time period about 3.5 years where Antiochus comes into Jerusalem and interrupts the temple sacrifices. Well, that falls right in line with 1,150 days. So I mean, so it's like there's enough proof to be like, wow, this looks like it matches up. And also there was like non-believers like Porphyry, who Saint Jerome wrote against in around 400 AD. And what Porphyry did was, it's not that they were like, oh, these details don't match up to history. No, they matched up really well. So the next way they could only attack it and say, oh, well, Daniel's not a prophet, was to say, oh, someone living during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes wrote all this. That was their way of attacking him. But it was like, why did you have to attack it that way? Because it was accurate. So they had to come up with a different way of attacking it. But so when you have like these modern day Sunday teachers and Seventh-day Adventists telling you, oh, this is future, I have a big issue with them, because it's like, how come you can't see what non-believers see? You're supposed to be a Christian, you're supposed to have light in your eyes, yet you can't see what non-believers see. And I have serious issues with that. There's another guy named I think his name is like John Collins, and he's like some non-believer professor, and it's like him and a few other professors even kind of tried to do the same thing Porphyry did. And even they were, basically were saying that, arguing from the same way that Porphyry did. So they're not denying that this doesn't accurately match up, that Daniel 11 doesn't accurately match up. They're arguing that, oh, it must have been written during that time period, and that's why it's so accurate. So, and I just kind of want to make that, because it's like I spent, and say this because I spent a lot of time in these churches, and it's like I did not know how to first even figure out who to listen to, who to read. And it's like there's so much out there and so many people to listen to, so many videos, so many writings. Like, where do I go to? And then you just kind of get frustrated. And it's like, well, I don't even know. I'm having trouble understanding it. I'll just believe Jesus is God. He died for me, and let me go DJ or go do all this other stuff. And it's just like you kind of, a lot of people just kind of give up, or they just focus on work, focus on other things, and it's like they just just kind of throw their hands up with the Bible. But if you at least understand where to first look, it's like then it's like maybe you'll have more of an interest. Because that's what happened to me. It's like once I started to understand, like, wow, all these churches and all these people, man, like, have it so wrong. And I go and I find out, and I start reading the notes in this Geneva Bible, and I'm like, wow, this actually makes sense to me. But at first, when I was like reading this stuff, it's like, it's like okay, like Daniel 9, because when I first started reading the Geneva Bible, it was Daniel 9. And because I was trying to figure out this prophecy and go down to the bottom, and it kind of startled me, because I was like, wait a minute, by the preaching of the gospel, he confirmed his promise first to the Jews and then after to the Gentiles. I'm like, wait a minute, Daniel 9:27. Every single church I grew up in said this is about the Antichrist. You mean the Antichrist is preaching the gospel? I'm like, wait, what? Did I get the right verse? I go back up here. I'm like, and he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of the abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. Like, wow, I was always told, in so many churches growing up, that's the Antichrist. And then I'm starting to read these Geneva Bible footnotes. I'm like, but the Antichrist is preaching the gospel, huh? Then I go to the next verse. I'm like, oh, Christ accomplished this by his death and resurrection. Started really thinking about this, and I was like, started reading it. I'm like, wow, this makes a lot more sense. But when I first started telling people, hey, I think Daniel 27 is about Jesus, they were like, oh, Chris, whoa, buddy, that's Antichrist, and just like treat me like garbage and stupid. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, do you have any idea that this was like taught by like Protestants back in the 1600s? Like, this is what people like the standard teaching was. Like, this isn't something crazy and new. This is what most Christians taught, that Jesus fulfilled this, and it even makes more sense when you're reading it. It's like, because if you read the whole prophecy, says nothing about and the Antichrist. Because, oh yeah, right here we go. It's verse 24. It tells you what this prophecy is going to be about, before it starts getting into it. You'll see no detail about Antichrist. It says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the wickedness and to seal up the sins and to reconcile the iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Nothing about an Antichrist. It says to anoint the most holy, bring in everlasting righteousness. To me, this all sounds like stuff that has to do with Jesus Christ. Like, I'm reading this and it's like, but see, when I'm growing up in all these churches and they're teaching me all this false stuff, it's like, that's why I threw up my hands. I'm like, wow, man, I'm not reading this. I keep going to them for answers. It was almost like a Catholic priest. It's like, I'm too stupid to understand it. Can you explain it to me again? And anyway, it says, know therefore and understand that from going forth the commandment to bring again the people and to build Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again and the wall even in the troublous times. So we already know there's 7 weeks that pass, which is 49 years, and then 62 weeks. The word weeks doesn't even exist in the text. It's sevens. So it should be, there shall be 7 sevens and 62 sevens, and the street shall be built again. So right here is about 483 years, right here, when you add all this up. And it says after 62 weeks. So that's when you add the 7 weeks here, which is 49 years, to the 62 weeks, that's 483 years, shall Messiah be slain. So after 69 weeks, basically, shall Messiah be slain. But you notice the word after right here in verse 26. So it has to happen after Easter. So there's only 1 more week left. Shall Messiah be slain and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of this battle shall be destroyed by desolations. So here's the final week right here. So we already know all these other weeks passed. So here's the final week. And we know Messiah has to be inside this prophecy. So if he's not in the other weeks, he's got to be in the last week. So that's just my simple way of like understanding this. And it makes sense to me. And I'm not going to get real deep into it, just kind of pointing that out. But yeah, I think I'm going to read this note too that I wrote in my community board on YouTube. I said, so if Seventh-day Adventists are going to connect Daniel 8 and 9 together by using the words mare and calzone, because what they do is the Seventh-day Adventists try to say Daniel 9 and Daniel 8 are linked together, and that Daniel 8, because they read a false version of, or I shouldn't say a false version, since, let me get back to this text so I can show. But in the King James Bible, it's got an error. And a lot of people are hating me over this one because it's like, see, that's another thing too. I grew up in a King James churches, and it's like King James only, and it's like you couldn't really figure this prophecy out either, because in a King James Bible it says basically unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Well, you're taking out the words evening, morning, and you're replacing it with the word days. So now you're basically essentially doubling the time period that this prophecy takes to be fulfilled. To me, I've tried to figure out every way it could be fulfilled by the 2,300 days, and I can't figure out how people come to that understanding. It just doesn't fit. But I can find out, I can read, Maccabees, Josephus, and see that, well, there was about 1,150 days that the sacrifices were stopped. And if you have an evening and a morning sacrifice, that's 2,300 sacrifices. Oh, now Daniel's not a false prophet. But you're making him into a false prophet because unless someone can show me a different way of understanding this, you're making them into a false prophet by insisting that this is 2,300 days, like the King James does. And it also kind of ruins the meaning of this, because the daily, this evening morning has to do with the daily sacrifice, just like I showed you in Numbers 28. Anyway, oh yeah. So the Seventh-day Adventists, what they try to do, because their religion's based on an error in the King James, and at the time, all these people were trying to do all this weird stuff with the Bible, basically, where it's like, well, we're going to take a day for a year, even though the text doesn't say you should do it here, but we're still going to take a day for a year prophecy and make a 2,300 year prophecy off of this, based on this word that's been incorrectly inserted in the King James Bible, the word days, when it wasn't supposed to be there. And then we're also going to do a day for a year prophecy, even though nothing in the entire text says you should do a day for a year prophecy here. And so it's like you're like doing two things wrong. You're inserting a meaning, like a day for a year principle, into a text that doesn't even call for it. And on top of that, the word day doesn't even exist in the text. So what they did was they started this prophecy at the decree of Artaxerxes, which is what Daniel 9 is supposed to be started at. And they connect these words, as you can see here, vision. There's like multiple, the word vision's used multiple times in this text, like right here also. Oops, I don't know what happened to my screen. I don't know what that blackout was, but anyway, this word vision, it can be, some places it's moray, some places it's calzone, and for whatever reason, like the 17th Adventists got this like convoluted way of saying, well, because this Daniel 9 and Daniel 8 are all part of the same vision or revelation, because like in I think like calzone means revelation, moray means appearance, and it gets translated as the word vision. And every single time they translate both words into just the word vision. And somehow that's why the Seventh-day Adventists connect all that. I don't want to go too deep into it. But so that's why they started in this weird starting point of the 2,300, even though it's telling you this Antichrist is going to take away this daily sacrifice, right? Because it says that time shall be given over him, the daily sacrifice for the iniquity, and he shall cast truth down to the ground. And then you read Ezra 7, where this decree of Artaxerxes goes out. And what's he doing? He's restoring the temple and the sacrifices. So if he's restoring the temple and the sacrifices, how can Daniel 8 also be the starting point? And the problem is, it's like you can actually say that you could use Mare and Calzone to tie both prophecies together, but it's not in the way Seventh day Adventists do it. Because the 2300 should not be years, but it's a 2300 that happens within the 490 years that are in Daniel 9. So the 70 weeks that Daniel 9 talks about, this 2300 evening mornings happens inside that prophecy. And someone would be like, well, how does it does, but does Daniel 8 start the same exact date? And the reason why it doesn't start on the exact same date, what it is because the temple sacrifices are started again and restored. Now you have something for the little horn to stop and take away, to make cease, because the sacrifices were stopped for a while. So I'll just kind of read what I wrote, because I say, so if 17 events are going to connect Daniel 8 and 9 together by using the words mare and kazon, in which most Bibles translate both words to be vision, and they insist both prophecies are connected, then it would be better to look at it this way. The restoration of the temple and the sacrifices by Ezra and his companions was part of God's plan to fulfill his promises to his people and to prepare them for the coming Messiah. However, it also set the stage for a future attack by Antiochus Epiphanes, who would try to destroy God's worship and God's people. Basically, the restoration of the temple and the sacrifice system has to happen first, and only then can the sacrifices be interrupted. So Daniel 8 cannot occur until the temple sacrifices are restored. Then the little horn can make them cease. So the sacrifices first have to be ongoing before the little horn can stop them, or else there is nothing to stop. So if you want to say that Mare and Kazone connect both of those, then this would be how it was connected, because you would have the sacrifice system started up again in Ezra. That way, in 167 BC, Antiochus could go and then stop these sacrifices for 2300 evenings and mornings. So, anyway, but the decree of Artaxerxes in the fall of 457 BC is not the beginning of the 2300 evening mornings, but is the restoration of the temple and the sacrifices that make it possible, so that later in 168 or 167 BC, the little horn Antiochus Epiphanes IV can halt the 2300 evening morning sacrifices and defiles the temple. And I say this has to be the proper interpretation if you're going to interpret Mare and Calzone in such a way, because Jesus does away with the need for the daily continual with his sacrifice on the cross. So any Bible teacher who tries to extend this prophecy beyond the crucifixion of Christ has to be a false teacher who is denying the gospel. There's no way of getting around this. Oops, I should have said they have to deny such texts as Hebrews 10. There can be no future fulfillments or double fulfillments, because there's simply no reason for God to set up animal sacrifices again. To even teach such a thing is possible is to be a wicked teacher. The reason why I say this is because the text is talking about God's people, and people sacrificing animals in the future and denying the finished work of Christ on the cross for atonements of sins would not be believers, therefore not God's people. And I quote Daniel 8:11, and extolled himself, talking about the little horn, and extolled himself against the prince of the host, from whom the daily sacrifice was taken, and the place of his sanctuary cast down. This sacrifice was done away with by Jesus. So this event had happened prior to the crucifixion. We do not do this sacrifice anymore because of the sacrifice of Jesus. He's the one perpetual sacrifice. And I just kind of go on with like a little rant. Um, you know what? I will read some of this rant because I say I really don't have time to make much videos or elaborate more on many thoughts I have. But just because I don't make as many videos as some does not mean I care less. I work 70 hours a week. I have 2 children, and I do what I can when I can. And I am basically trying to point something unique out that I don't see others pointing out. If I saw other videos pointing this out, I would probably do different videos. And I get real sick of people trying to judge me when they can't even get basic Bible concepts correct. When I do research into Bible prophecy and eschatology, I think the Seventh day Adventist Church has muddied the waters up quite a bit, and more than most people realize. And that's a problem too, is why I do so many of these videos, is because I'm researching Daniel. Like today, I was like trying to look up something on Daniel 8 and 2300, right? And all this Seventh day Adventist just starts popping up, man. Now, if I'm a new person trying to look this up, like someone could hear my video and be like, oh, I'm going to research what Chris said, and they start looking up Daniel 8, 2300. And let's say you're not familiar with the Seventh day Adventist, you're going to wind up, and let's say you type in Antiochus, you'll start hitting all these Seventh day Adventist videos and links. At least that's what happens to me when I do a search. It's like I think like only 1 out of 4 are not Seventh day Adventists. And if you don't know this stuff, you're going to wind up reading a ton of Seventh day Adventist material, and you don't know what to look for, and you just sat there and just spent 30 minutes of your life reading a bunch of garbage from a Seventh day Adventist. So it's like, and it causes me to lose my mind. Um, so, someone says I keep saying Antiochus name wrong, and it's no. Yeah, actually, I've heard other people who are pretty educated. So that's why I'm like confidently just saying this. I think there's just more than one way to pronounce it, because I like I said, I heard a guy, man, I had was saying all those names like the Seleucids and um a lot of those old Greek names that I don't know how to quite pronounce, and he pronounced it the same way I did, Antiochus Epiphanes. And I was like, okay, well, if that's how you say it, that's what I'll say. But yeah, I do realize, people say it differently. Um, but anyway, so I basically just don't do this just to like, oh wow, I found someone that's so wrong and I'm gonna hammer them, and so I can look so good and so right. It's basically like my nerves get racked when I keep coming across this trash that wasted so much of my life. Going to church for 40 years and having my life wasted. Listening to Seventh day Adventists, reading their material, not realizing it's Seventh day Adventist material, and having my life wasted. It's like, um, so yeah, I guess it's like with me, I'm still a little bit burned out from 2020 and the convid or COVID, um, and just people's reaction to it. I mean, it's like even today, I saw someone who has like a YouTube channel, and he's trying to justify, wearing a mask. And it's like, there's no justification for going along with any of this stuff. It ruined children's lives. Like I had a friend who didn't even get to see his wife have a baby. He saw all of his other kids have a baby, but he didn't get to see his wife have a baby. Right. And what was it? It was because of stupid COVID mandates that prevented him from sitting in the same room as his wife having a baby. And you people that go along with this stuff, it's like it's so weird. It's like, well, Chris, you don't talk about the gospel, but yet I'm out there in public trying to do things, trying to do good things. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I mean, like, I'm trying to do things. And a lot of these people that criticize me were just sitting at home on a keyboard. And it's like, okay, you're talking about well, you're saying you're talking about the gospel of people and spreading the word of God, but don't be like bashing me when I'm out there, and it's like, because it's like these mandates are real. They affect people's lives. Like if you go, like if I was out there feeding someone, are you going to bash me? Okay, so now if I'm out there fighting a mandate that could lead to someone losing a job, which would lead to them not being their kid, like I'm still doing some sort of good, right? It's not like I'm just like just talking about COVID for no reason, right? I mean, these things have serious effects and consequences. Like my friend not being able to be there for his wife having a baby. Someone else not being able to, their kid is scared going into surgery. Oh, you don't get to be there for your kid. And it might be his last time. What if your kid dies on that surgery table? Your kid was scared going into that surgery and you didn't get to be with him his last moments and he dies, right? And he's scared. It's like that kind of stuff just makes me sick with people. And you guys keep thinking like, "Oh, it was okay for me to wear this mask. I'm just being polite." No, you're not. You're not being polite. You're contributing to this evil that I saw go on. I didn't wear it. I'm not dead. No one around me is dead. The people I know who suffered couldn't get early medical treatment. Why? Oh, because it wasn't essential. So their medical testing and stuff got delayed. Oh, well, now your cancer's so bad, you're dead, right? Or something else happens with them, a heart condition, couldn't get detected fast enough, wasn't essential. All this COVID. It's like, I mean, like it's a lot of stupidity. And I'm like, well, if you guys have so much light in your eyes and you're so much of a better Christian than me, and you're gonna bash me, you're gonna rip me apart, why is it that you were just cheering for Trump this whole time? I thought you had light in your eyes. How come you can't see this stuff going on and just go along with it and it rips people's lives apart? But yeah, I'm the bad Christian. There. I mean, there's a lot going on, and it's like I don't see no one pushing back. I think if people were so holy like they think they are, they'd be doing more pushing back, but they don't. Because they don't care. Because see, if you really cared, why aren't you doing more, man? You see how this stuff is messing up kids. You think that stuff's okay for like a little kid to go to school for 8 hours a day wearing a mask? All this other crap. Kids, going into surgery. Parent can't be by his side. You couldn't hug your grandmother before she dies. You have to go hug her through plastic. And you guys want to sit there and criticize me? It's like, man, I'm like so done with these people. You're not. Don't tell me you're Christian until I see you guys out there doing something. You don't criticize me. I don't want to be here. Oh, Chris, talk about the gospel more. Well, what all have you done? I mean, it's like I don't talk about it. Like a lot of this stuff I do to try to help people lead them out of error. Um, and I'm trying to, like point things out, while I'm pointing out, these stupid mandates, a messed up government. I do try to work an angle into it to where someone who's like a non-believer, where I give them some kind of interest in the gospel, like show them, like, okay, we can see all this going on. Where can you find hope for? Why is all this going on? Why is this allowed to go on? What's an answer for it? Like this isn't just me like okay, there's this guy, and there's a couple of these people, that do videos. I'm not going to say what channel name they're on. I don't even feel like promoting them. But all they do is talk about how bad things are, mandates, this next government thing going on, AI going on, all this other stuff. And it's like but it's like, where's your solutions at? I'm like, never a solution. It's like, at least with me, I'm like, I was trying to promote solutions. I was like, hey, why don't we talk more about jury nullification and things like that? A lot of people are like, what is that? It's like, well, why didn't all these truthers tell you about jury nullification? That was one easy way to fight all this. Because you know what? Got 2 votes. Go look this up, people. Got 2 votes. Not only when you go and elect someone, but when you serve jury duty, you get to vote on the law yourself. Because if you think something's an unjust law or an unconstitutional law, or you don't like that law, you don't have to find that person guilty. Like if I said, you know what, I think it's really bad that anyone goes to jail for smoking weed, right? Because it's a plant that grows out of the ground. If I got on a jury, chances are no one's going to jail that day. Not if they decide to fight it, because I'm going to rule them innocent. I'm going to be like, that was a bad law, and rule them innocent. um, and you're allowed to do that. So, like, let's say someone like they do some mandate you don't like. Guess what? Here's a real simple solution. Tell people about jury nullification. We all sit there and resist it. And whoever has to like go to court over it, you just rule them innocent. There, boom, gone. No more. We ended this. We ended all the tyranny because that's sort of what happened during Prohibition, of alcohol. They just wouldn't convict them. Like, hey, I think this is a stupid law. Guess what? You had to get rid of Prohibition. We can do the same thing. But see, all these truthers, they'll just be, it's so bad. It's so bad. They just do nothing but scare you, never offer a solution. And then people, because I'm sitting here trying to offer solutions, and then people want to hammer me and attack me. It's like it's just nuts. And I get kind of sick of it. I think that's probably why I get burned out doing videos. It's because it's like I'm so overwhelmed and so I have so little time. And then it's like, and then it's so little support, and then you get these people just fighting you for no reason. I'm actually trying. I tried to run for office, and it's like, Chris, I don't want to vote for you. You say some weird things. Okay, let's go look at this guy that's running against me. He's a Roman Catholic. He doesn't give a crap about anything. And I'm like, so you would rather not support me running, which automatically is going to let this guy win in the Republican Party. I'm just trying to get on the Republican ticket, and it's like, can you at least help me get on? No, I don't like, but I was out in the rain protesting all of Trump's mandates and stuff. Well, but Chris, we like Trump. It's like, but do you like the vaccine? Do you like the lockdown? No, we hate it. Well, I was protesting against that, and Trump did that by renewing the emergency order every 90 days. And I was out in the rain. Where was Mike Braun? Where was all these other Indiana representatives? Melinda Grisham and oh, there's one other guy. We're the only other two people besides me running for office that were out in rain protesting this stuff. But because I called out Donald Trump, everyone's got an issue with me, and it's insane, because it's. But yeah, sorry about that rant. But just some things I see going on, it's just, people, it's like people attacking. Uh, I mean, I think I'm a Christian, and you get attacked by all these other people, that call themselves Christians, and just because they say, I don't preach the gospel enough or whatever, man, it's like, but I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to do some good. I mean, at least I was out in the rain during all this stuff. I was, but it's like, I don't know, man, for some reason, I guess it's not good enough for people. And, um, I don't know. I don't want to keep rambling on. I got that stuff in the back of my mind that's really kind of getting to me, and I do plan on doing a show with someone soon, talking about basically everything going on in the world as far as like the mandates, lockdowns, what you're who's behind it all. I think it'll be a pretty good show. And what I'm hoping to do is promote this person, since they got the time to sit there and do these videos, and they seem to be on the same page as me for the most part. I think that's why I want to interview them. And if this is so, I will try to help them promote their channel to 100,000 people or 1,000,000 people. I think it's easy to do, but it's hard to find people that actually see what's going on. And this person does understand that the Jesuits have a hand in this, that the Vatican does have a hand in this, and they actually yeah, I was actually surprised that they even spoke up about it, because they were on a show where the main guy was pushing, like, saying, "Oh, the Zionists are behind it," and this person spoke up and was like, "Well, actually, the Vatican is behind Zionism, And I was like, well, good for this person, for speaking up, because this person's pretty big in the alternative media scene. And for this other person to call them out, well, not to call them out, but to kind of push back against them, saying Zionism is responsible for all this, when it's not. The whole Zionism thing, that's the result of the Vatican needing to create a Zionist state so it can have a doctrine like futurism, because futurism can't exist unless you have this Israel existing with a future third temple. So the Vatican had to create the nation state of Israel so it can have that 70 weeks of Daniel prophesying how that future 70th week in the future, where a third temple antichrist is going to make a 7-year peace treaty with the Jews, and then in the midst of the week he breaks this treaty. And for all that to happen, you have to create the state of Israel. And it also gives the Vatican a convenient people to blame, and it makes the antichrist, instead of like all the reformers, they all thought the papacy was the antichrist, and the pope was the antichrist, was the image of the beast, the image of the earth beast. That's what people like Thomas Newton, Bishop Thomas Newton, wrote in his book. I think it's Dissertations on Prophecy. I think that might be what the name of the book was. It was some book he wrote in late 1700s, I think. I can't remember if it's like the early 1800s or late 1700s. But I think it was late 1700s, now that I think about it. But anyway, he wrote that, this pope, this antichrist, it's not that it's some special guy that's going to shoot lasers out of his eyes, and when he's walking by, it's like, dogs start fighting and ripping people apart, and like that little kid you see in the movie The Omen, Damien. It's like, and it's everyone's like watching out for Damien, and they're looking out for this like third temple antichrist. It looks like all these movies, like, oh, Damien, I'm looking for you. It's like, no, it's just some guy. And you know what? I should read that part, man. That Thomas Newton, couldn't even find it. Like this or something like Thomas Newton. Here we go. I think it's page 285. I can't believe I got close to it like that. Kind of blow it up. Let's see here. Oh, here's one more thing. Just kind of go back to my point of Daniel 8. Josephus likewise. So even Josephus affirms that Antiochus forbade the Jews to offer daily sacrifices, which they offered to God according to the law. He compelled them to also to leave off service of their God and to worship those whom he esteemed gods, and to build temples and erect altars to them in every city and village, and to sacrifice swine upon them every day. So I just kind of want to point out that even Josephus believed that Daniel 8 was fulfilled. All the Jews believed it. It's just that modern day Christianity can't seem to teach it right. But anyway, let me see if I can find this part about the Antichrist, because I think this is really good what he wrote. Oh, I thought this was the book. Oh, well, I thought this was the book. Yeah, let me go one more page. Maybe I'm just on the wrong page, because I know it's around pages 285. But the thing I liked about the book, I guess I don't know where it is, and this it might be a different book that Thomas Newton wrote. But the one thing I liked about Thomas Newton was he was like, oh, it's not like some great human being. He's only made great. He's like a nobody until he steps into that position. And then he becomes the image of the beast. Because whenever you're Pope, you now represent the papacy. So you now become this image of the beast. So it's not really that the man it's some great man, but he's made great by the position he's thrown into. It's kind of like president, it's like, Donald Trump's sort of a nobody until you make him president. Biden is kind of a nobody until you make him president. So it's kind of like the Antichrist is like an office you hold, like a presidency, but not so much like. At least that's the way I view it. I wish I could find what Thomas Newton wrote, because he wrote it to where he said it a lot. He articulated it a lot better. I don't know. Maybe sometime I'll make a video on just reading just that part, because I think that's a better way of looking at what the Antichrist is. Because some people are like, well, I don't like calling the Pope Antichrist because that means you think he's unsavable and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I don't know if he's savable or not. I mean, I kind of just look at him as just a man. But I mean, when he's in that office, I do hold him to be Antichrist. And but kind of got off subject. But basically, when the Vatican, they did not like the Protestants calling the Pope Antichrist, so they came out with this thing called futurism, which even Clarence Larkins in his book Dispensational Truth. Now he's a futurist, and he admits in his book that the Catholic Church and the Jesuits came up with futurism to take the eyes off the papacy being called the Antichrist. And then Clarence Larkins goes on the same book, and he's like, and this is the view I hold as well. Meaning he's a futurist also. And he described the three different types. He described preterism, which he even admitted was created by the Jesuits to take the eyes off the Pope and make it, the Antichrist was something that happened in the past. And then he said then you got your historicist school of thought, which was like the secret weapon of the martyrs, because they believed that the papacy was the Antichrist, and they believed that all the stuff that was happening to him was happening to him because the papacy was the Antichrist, and that's how they had enough strength to even do and endure what they did, because they felt like they were opposing Antichrist himself. Because if you're not thinking that and not believing that, maybe you can't endure those same cruel punishments. But those people seem to believe that this was like that the papacy was that biblical earth beast. So that's what they saw that they were resisting. So I guess that's what gave them the extra courage to endure what they endured. But I just find it real interesting that a lot of futurists, they do subscribe to Clarence Larkins, own some of his books. And here's Clarence Larkins admitting that his interpretation, futurism, was created by the Jesuits. So when I tell people, that when you teach this futurism stuff, and I say, I kind of see you as being a traitor to Christianity. That's why, because I link it all to the creation of the Antichrist to deceive people. And it doesn't even make sense when you read Daniel 9 and you try to say that that's, like, how many prophecies does God say, this is going to be so many days, yet the final, I don't know, 6-7 days of it's thrown into the future, 3 days. Hey, I'm going to throw this in the future. Still a prophet, but he's going to throw it in the future. Like, you just never see a hunk of a hunk of time and a prophecy cut off and then thrown into the future. It's almost always consecutive. It's like if God says it's going to be so many years, it's so many years, and it happens. So you got like a start date and an end date, and it's always the same. But for some reason, when it comes to that Daniel 70th week, everyone allows a totally different interpretation, a totally different set of hermeneutics, a totally just some they interpret that totally different than what they would interpret the rest of the Bible. And when I see people just do this and it looks so dishonest to me, I I can't help but feel like they're really deceiving people, and it's treasonous. Sorry, my kids are banging at the door, and I'm trying to hurry this up, and it kind of distracted me. Um, but when I see these teachers in these churches, and they're teaching that that the 70th week of Daniel should be thrown into the future, I see them doing the work of the devil, basically. Since I think the papacy is the earth beast and the papacy is the antichrist, and I see all this other stuff the papacy does, the way it tortured martyrs. I mean, people just for merely trying to teach their children the Lord's Prayer in English, and they would get violently persecuted. It's just, and it's like, how can you think that this has a Christian spirit to it? Like, you think this is God's church on earth? And then you read things like, where Jesus says, narrow is the way and few find it, and it's like broad is the path that leads to destruction. And so you're going to think that here's this big church wrapped up in ecumenicism, right? Where it's not even other Christian religions, but they even have like world prayers with Muslims, Hindus, voodoo priests up on stage, and it's like you see it like gathered, and it's almost like the Pope is like the spiritual president of the world, right? And you look at that and to go, well, I don't see nothing wrong with that. And in the back of my mind, it's just I always keep hearing the Bible tell me, narrow is the way and few find it, and broad is the path that leads to destruction. And then I see this religion with over 1 billion followers. And not only that, it's caught up in ecumenism. Then it's even caught up in all this world businesses and stuff like that. And it's like, well, you gotta, I guess, include them, because look at all this influence they got. So they got like this. I mean, if you got a billion followers, maybe you should listen to the church with 1 billion followers, right? So then maybe you want those votes, or you want those Catholics to buy your stuff. Now you gotta watch what you say. Or you want them to support you, you want them to get behind you, got to watch what you say. And then you also see the Pope talking with other religions, and now he can group with those other people and put stress and influence on things. So to think that they don't have any power in this world is just insane to me, when they have 1 billion followers and they're wrapped up in all this. And just to see the things they've done to people. Like, there was a Protestants that had their babies stolen in Spain for over 40 years. There's something like 300,000 babies stolen and given to Catholic families. These were hospitals that were Catholic run. They're taking babies and stealing them and giving them to Catholic families. And what happened? And you can't tell me the Catholic Church didn't know. 40 years of this going on, not one single confession, no one knows, not one single confession in the priest's booth, And it's like, come on, man. People know. It's like there's just no way all this goes on without them knowing. And that's just one little thing, let alone the Eustachi. That's you had in the World War II this group called the Eustachi, and they were more cruel than the Nazis. And what they did was forced Catholic conversions, and it was ran by Catholic priests or Catholic clerics. So And then the Pope gives that leader, Anti-Pavelak, like all these rewards and stuff like that, and honoraries or honorary rewards or something like that. And so something like this that's clearly Catholic run, a horrible thing. But yeah, if I tell people about it, people are like, what is that? What's a Eustache? Well, shouldn't people know about that? We know about the Nazis. Why don't we know about this? Well, and why is that not mentioned in our media? And then you got those people that say, well, the Jews run everything. Well, if the Jews run everything and it was killing Orthodox Christians and Jews and gypsies and anyone else who wasn't Roman Catholic, why would we see other bad things talked about in the media? Why don't we see this one talked about or ever brought up? Never at all on a history channel, public broadcasting channels, nothing, no word of this ever in my whole entire life. I've never heard of the Eustache. No one, to my knowledge, no one has seen this talked about on a public broadcast, right? On TV. No one saw, at least in America. I don't think this has ever been talked about. But if the Jews run everything, why did the Jews keep this out of media, right? It just doesn't make sense. That's why it's like when these people tell me, "Oh, the Jews run everything," no, because there's too many things that. Why do we know about this, but we don't know about that? Why would one thing be talked about in the media, but something else like never ever mentioned? And then when I see all these guys, man, running everything, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Laura Ingraham, nothing but Roman Catholics, and I'm listening to them and I'm getting my voting advice from nothing but Roman Catholics. And, you start putting two and two together and start like, maybe they're running things. And that's why I never hear about these things that they do. But anyway, that's it for my show. I want to keep it short.